All right, so we are live. I am so excited. And I know I say that for everything, but I'm so excited because today is the first episode of the Skin is In podcast. So welcome to everybody listening, to everybody watching. Thank you so much for being here. So I honestly am so internally happy right now because this is something that I have wanted to do for such a long time. And I thought we could start out this first episode talking a little bit about who we are, so our listeners can kind of get to know me, get to know you, and also I thought it would be really good for us to answer our slogan, which is why survive when you can thrive, and just what this podcast is and all that good stuff. So this is something that I've literally wanted to do for like a year.
Yeah.
And it literally took COVID-19 literally COVID had to happen for me to have the time and the energy and just the space to finally sit down and start a podcast.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and kick us off, and I will let you guys know a little bit about me. So my name is Natalie Warren. I am from Campbellsville, Kentucky, which is a super small town in the middle of central Kentucky. So I always tell people it's like an hour and a half away from every like major city in Kentucky, like an hour away from Louisville, an hour away from Lexington, 2 hours away from Nashville. So I grew up in a really small town. And I, like so many people, was just a dreamer. And I had dreams of owning a business and dreams of moving to like a large city and just becoming this like girl boss, like entrepreneur. So just to give you a little backstory about me, growing up, I obviously struggled with really severe acne. And that, even though it was so hard to go through as a teenager, it actually fueled my love and passion for skincare. And to make a long story short, I became an esthetician. I left my super small town and I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. I studied aesthetics at a Veda Institute down there in Franklin. And basically, I lived in Nashville for a year. And I fell in love with the culture, and I fell in love with just the idea of like Nashville is just such a city for dreamers, I feel like. And I just loved that vibe. I loved that culture. And a part of me had this dream of bringing that to Kentucky. So I started my company, which is called Skinspiration. And it started out just me, literally a solo esthetician, just renting a room. And I had my treatment table and I had all, my little products. And I, would perform facials for like 12 hours a day. And slowly, as I started utilizing social media and as, my business started to grow, I was able to expand. And so now we have a location on Main Street in the center of Campbellsville, Kentucky, which is really cool. And I have a team of 5 amazing women who I get to work with every single day. And I've always kind of had this passion for empowering people and inspiring people. That's kind of where Skinspiration started. And I would use my love and my knowledge of skincare to inform people and educate people on their skin. And after we did that, they could finally experience like self-confidence in a way that they had never had before. Like growing up, like with acne, like I 100% know what it feels like to feel insecure and feel not your best self. So Skinspiration was all about and is all about helping people discover their best self through skincare. This is a little bit different. The podcast is a little bit just different. So as I've basically went through my journey in my career, I've learned a lot of lessons. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've had a lot of failures. And everyone in my life has heard me say this, like, I wish I could go back and tell myself like everything that I know now. And that is kind of where this podcast comes from. So for those of you guys listening, if maybe you're in the skincare industry and you're like, I cannot wait to hear, everything that she's going to talk about because I can relate to it. Or if you're in a different industry and you are a young woman who, maybe looks at, Skinspiration or looks at, some of the projects that I do, and just have questions of like, how are you doing this? How do you make this happen? How do I get to point A to point B. This is what this podcast is about. So I'm kind of talking a little bit. So Kayla, you take over. Tell them a little bit about you.
Yeah, so my name is Kayla, and I actually just recently, within the past year, completely decided to be on board with Skinspiration, and I just love Natalie, the way we met, and just everything was so crazy. It was almost like God had just placed us together for a specific reason. And so basically since December of last year, we've been working together, and I fell in love with Skinspiration. I fell in love with being able to help people with the same, like lifestyle issues that I had with acne, and with just connecting with clients, connecting with different people than I was used to. And then before Skinspiration, I worked at Campbellsville University. So I worked there for about a little over 2 years in their church outreach program, which is like polar opposite from what we do, but at the same time, the skills that I used there were transferred so easily to the position I'm in now. So I love creativity. I was a creative director in my other position. And so being in this position as a creative coordinator is so much fun. I love creating graphics. I love the marketing aspect of social media and just marketing in general. I love meeting people's needs. And I'm also an MFT student, so I'm studying to be a marriage and family therapist, and that is a huge part of who I am. I'm a huge mental health nut. I love it. And I also just love reading, and I genuinely have just enjoyed so much being able to be a part of a team and someone like Natalie who also just has the same energy and pushes everyone on her team to just be better. And like for me, that is it's different to say like, oh, I have a million dreams, because I've always been a dreamer. And then to be around community that supports and encourages and uplifts those dreams. So that has been like a game changer for me, to have community who really sees the dreams that I have and pushes me to, chase after those things. So whether it's in the mental health field, whether it's in, my creative field, whether that is in being an author or writing books and doing other things, like this job and this position helped me so much to just see my vision a little bit deeper. But also this podcast, for me, I just feel like that same energy, that same push, that same, inspiration is going to come through this podcast for so many other people. Like I remember feeling so lonely in my dreams. I had like one other person in my office that was like, yeah, you got this. But outside of that, I just felt so alone in the things I was dreaming for. I didn't feel like the things I wanted could be accomplished. But then going from having like one person who has your back to having like a ton of other females around you and just people who are really like supporting you in that really has helped me to become, closer to the dreams that I want and become the person I want to be. And I genuinely believe that this podcast is that place for whoever is listening. And so just look at this podcast as less of something you're just going to listen to and use as entertainment, and more of a community of people who are really just going to push you forward to your dreams and really have your back on that as well.
That's the whole goal. And the goal of the Skin is In podcast isn't just to be a source of education for business, for leadership, for entrepreneurship. We obviously want every single one of you guys who's listening to this to walk away with something after every single episode. That's our goal. But it's also to create a place of extreme encouragement. And I'm sure a lot of people related to you with what you just said, which was, I felt like I didn't have that support system. And you're a 23-year-old woman, and you're just now kind of experiencing people in your life who you have really good relationships with and who encourage you and who push you to fulfill your dreams. And that is so necessary for every single successful person. You cannot make it in any industry alone. You're never going to be able to fulfill your ultimate dream alone. You will have to have people beside you, in front of you, behind you, like encouraging you. And I think that there's so many people listening to this who have so many questions for you of how did you become, creative coordinator? How did you become, director of a business? So those are things that I really want to dive in deep into other episodes as well on some of the things that we really want to teach you guys are not only like how to be a great esthetician or how to, make money in the beauty industry. We want to teach you how to build a brand.
Yeah.
Whatever your brand may be. Maybe you're listening to this and you're a pharmacy student right now, or maybe you, like I said, are in the beauty industry like me, or you're in, Kayla's industry where you're just a creative and maybe you don't really have a direction. If you're a creative who doesn't have a direction, we have so many things coming for you. We've got some really awesome interviews and podcast episodes scheduled that I cannot wait for you guys, because that's so common. I feel like there's so many people who have a gift for creativity, or they have a gift for leadership, or a gift of a business idea, but they don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And that is the point of this podcast. This podcast is to give you, like I said, a way to get from point A to point B, and to build your brand and to achieve your dreams and just level up in every area of your life. I know for me, like, I have been in places in my life where I felt like I was surviving. And now, as a 21-year-old woman, I truly, truly feel like I am thriving. And when we were, kind of getting creative and trying to figure out a slogan for the podcast, we kept coming back to that. And that's actually something Kayla said. She was like, why survive when you can thrive? Yeah. And what does it even mean to thrive? What does that look like? What does it look like to be fully happy in every area of your life? And it's never going to happen fully. Right. We're constantly going to be growing and improving, but that is what this podcast is about, because I've been in both, and I'm sure you have too. Like, I've had times in my life where I felt like I didn't have a best friend who could encourage me and who was uplifting me. I had people around me who, were talking about me behind my back, or were, telling me that my dreams were too big, when in reality, they were just too big for them because they were thinking so small. So this podcast is a place for dreamers. It's a place for visionaries. It's a place for some of y'all crazy people.
But you have to be crazy, right? You got to be crazy to, like, literally envision something that's never been done and then make it a reality. Like, it's literally insane that we have the ability to do that. And I want to, like, touch on the slogan again for just a second, because we have this innate nature within us as human beings to survive. Yeah. And so regardless of what that survival looks like, for a homeless person, it looks different than a millionaire. And then for just like a low income family, that looks different from like the kindergarten who's trying to survive, like kindergartner who's trying to survive being in this new environment. And so like survival is in us, but I think what happens is also comfortability is within us as well. And so sometimes like we feel like we're surviving, we get to a place of comfortability and then we stop. And it's like that spot of comfortability blocks so many people's dreams. And it's like you see it every day, and then people see other people who are just like, how did they even get there? And it's like they pushed past that place of comfortability, that place of safety, and decided like, I see a vision and I'm going to go for it all in. Yeah. And what I was telling you recently was I am more afraid to never do the things that I dream about versus honestly doing them and failing. I would rather do every single dream that I have or work towards it and fail rather than, never do it and then have to live with that regret of like, what if? Like, what if I would have done that brand? What if I would have taken that position? What if I would have traveled across the state? You know what I mean? And so for me, I just think that we have to get out of this survival, comfortability position in life and move towards a dreaming and impactful life, a life where we are seeing something that's within us and then making it a reality. And so that slogan is just like, why survive when you can thrive? Yeah, because you can.
Right. And everyone can. And there's nothing special about me. There's nothing special about Kayla. Any successful person, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, like if you are someone who follows like the millionaire mindset, you've got a list of people that you admire and people that you want to be like. And there's nothing special about those people. Elon Musk, like I could keep going. The only difference is they made the choice to do it. Yeah. And that is what this podcast is about, is we want to encourage you, if you are listening to this in your car or in your bed or wherever you're listening to this right now, and you have a dream that's been inside of you maybe for years, or maybe it just entered your mind last night. We want to encourage you to turn that dream into a business, and that dream into not only something that kind of takes up your time, but a successful, thriving business. And we also want to show you how to scale that. And just to touch on what you had just said, with, not being afraid to fail. I failed so many times in my career. Like I'm still making mistakes. I'm still, there's so many areas in my career as an esthetician where I have failed in. And that was something else that this whole platform is really a way for me to be a lot more vulnerable with people. And just, if I can save you, if I can save you from making some of the mistakes that I've made, even if it's just one person, I feel like that I have achieved what this podcast was supposed to be. Because especially in the industry, not everyone has a mentor. Not everyone has that person who is, going to tell you, okay, do this, don't do this. You can do this, but be aware of this and XYZ. And our goal is to be that for you. And maybe we can't relate specifically to the industry that you're in, but if you're in the beauty industry, I got you.
Yeah. And I will say, like, about the failing aspect, I worked in a very high level organization that had multi-sites, about over 20 sites across the US. And one thing that they learned in a teaching was so like impactful for me. And their slogan is "Fail Forward." So it's like, you're always going to fail, right? But it's like, never allow that failure to push you back into a place that you don't want to be, or to push you back and be like, man, why did I do that? But their slogan was, we're going to fail forward, because every single person will fail, but it's about how you fail, So it's like, choose to fail forward. If you mess up, okay, what did you learn? How can you incorporate it into what's next? And how have you grown? And then you push forward. And then eventually you keep pushing forward until you're at that place. Like, a football player isn't going to get tackled and lay on the ground and be like, man, I just failed the whole game. Yeah. Like, no, the game tells you have to get up. You got to hit the next play. And that's like so many other places. There's so many other places that genuinely need leaders who push forward, even in the face of like, man, I failed on that. You know what I mean?
Well, and honestly, I think there's a saying that goes, nothing builds character better than failure. And for me personally, it may seem kind of corny, but I always try to tell myself that I don't have failures. I just have lessons. There were so many things, like when I, was starting Skinspiration, like business mistakes that I made, whether it be like with taxes or just typical, very, very common mistakes people make when you're opening a business, which we want to save you from, and we'll get into that in later episodes. But it's one of those things where the one thing that will completely prevent you from living your dream life, receiving your dream job, having your dream career, having just your dream life, will be you not taking action. Because so many people get paralyzed by fear. And we just want to shatter that. And so the whole point of this podcast is to just encourage you to do it, even if you fail. Like, what happens if you fall on your face in front of all people, which I've done that. Fun fact, one time at a high school basketball game, I literally fell. We did this thing where we like stormed the court, and there's a video of me falling like flat on my face in front of the entire gym. It was humiliating. It was embarrassing. Like, imagine being a 16-year-old and like girl in high school. This is like the worst thing that could happen to you. And it was horrible. But like, just to give you an example, I have literally fallen flat on my face in front of hundreds of people, and I'm okay. Like, I'm still here. And if anything, like I said, it builds character. I still have the bruises to prove it.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is literally like a completely random story, but I remember playing soccer, and I used to be so bad before I started practicing. And I remember one game I was like starting, I was so hyped. I was like, yeah, I'm that girl. So I get on the field. This huge defender comes running at me, and I'm lucky like, oh my gosh, I'm like a sophomore in high school. I'm super tiny. And this girl like trucks me. Like, I remember there's a picture in our newspaper back home of me like literally, if you're watching the YouTube video, you can see this, but my body was basically like flying, and I hit the ground so hard. And I just remember I jumped back up, and I was like, let's go again. So it's like, let it inspire you, like let push it inspire forward, you. Like, it's fine.
Oh, I've got so many more stories like that, because like straight up, like this can get kind of fake deep, and I don't want it to sound that way, but like, I really want to speak to people who feel like they're a failure in life, because I have felt that way. That little story that I told was just kind of like an example, but there have been times where I felt the humiliation, I felt the embarrassment of like what that moment did to me, but like from other situations tenfold. And I really just, that's something that I'm so passionate about, because I speak to so many people, and there's a lot of people who message me who were like, Natalie, how are you so young and you've got this thriving business and you're able to employ people and you're able to travel the world and live out your dreams? And I really had to honestly ask myself the question. I was like, how did I do that? Because I am not special, and I don't even really consider myself successful.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever consider myself successful because to me, I hold the word success to such a high standard.
Yeah.
I do, however, feel very accomplished with what I've been able to achieve and the things that I've been able to do and the brand that I've been able to create. And it took me a really long time to realize that I was an expert at something. Like I said, I had this idea for the podcast for literally probably about a year.
Yeah.
And every single time I would sit down or every single time I would try to message, our camera guy, like I had this idea, I really want to do that. Something would always happen where it never just came into fruition. Like I just never made the step. And honestly, because in the back of my head, I was thinking to myself, who am I? Who am I to tell people to sit on this microphone and to tell people how to live their best life or how to be a good business owner or how to be, successful? Like, who am I to do this? And you have to stop listening to those voices. If you listen to those voices, you will never achieve anything in your life because you will be so scared to even try.
Yeah.
And I finally had to say, you know what? I'm not perfect. I'm not, freaking a millionaire or anything like that, but I've been through so much in my career that I really want to just inform people. I really want to encourage people. And like I said, if I can help one person just avoid a mistake that I made early on in the beauty industry or in any other industry, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
And I think that that's another thing that we can touch on more in depth in some other episodes, but you are an expert at something.
Yeah.
You are an expert at something. And that's something that I really, really had to just tell myself. And I keep having to tell myself. So we are like on this journey with you. Like this podcast honestly is for ourselves. Like I just wanted a place to really talk about my experiences, my failures, my mistakes. And like I said, I really hope that you guys can learn from this and be encouraged by this and all the amazing things we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, like we said from the beginning, it really is a slogan of like, yeah, we want you to thrive in life, but it's also something that helps us to thrive in life as well because we're choosing to, chase this dream, chase this podcasting dream. But it's also like we're in the grind with you. And that's why we want this to be a place where we can just connect with you. This isn't just something you have to listen to and we're on the other side of the mic, but it's something that you all are always free to DM us. We have social media accounts. We're not just like these fake people behind a camera, but like we actually genuinely want to take people from, the place where we used to be and take them to the place where they can be. Not the place where we are, but the place where they can be.
Yeah.
And so for me specifically, like I want people to genuinely not feel alone. And whatever your craft is, whatever the thing that inspires you is, like, I don't want you to be in the place that I was in when I felt very alone in my dreams.
Right.
And just know you don't have to be, because you do have people, regardless of if they're, not in your office or they're not at your job or they're not in school with you, regardless of what that position looks like. There are people in the world that are like-minded like you, and I think that this podcast is a place for people to be represented in that aspect. And so that's something that I'm so excited for.
Yeah, I just feel like I could literally burst right now after like everything that we talked about, because this really is like our heart. And it was my heart. It was where my heart was when I started Skinspiration, and now I just feel it even more full starting, this podcast and having this platform. And I really, really hope that you guys are encouraged and are empowered by some of the topics we're going to be able to talk about and the people that we're going to have on. And right now, if you're listening to this and you feel alone, just know that you're not. Like, if you feel like you have literally nobody, like nobody gets me, nobody supports my vision, nobody supports my dreams, just know that we do. Like, that may not mean much, but just know that Natalie and Kayla do, and that we support you. And one day we want to have you on this podcast, and we want to talk about your story and your dream and your brand and this following your dreams. So we talked about a lot of things. This was a good pilot episode, Kayla.
Definitely.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we should finish off because we kind of spent the entire episode talking about this, but why survive when you can thrive, which is our slogan. So let's actually like answer that question personally for each of us, because I feel like we both care about the same thing. And something that we share, like a life experience that we both shared, is literally being like at rock bottom. Like I know you've been there, I know if I've been there. And I don't know if any of our listeners feel this way, whether, you know, your marriage or your family is on the rocks, or, you know, so many people have just lost their jobs or are forced to like close their small business right now because of COVID. And what do you have to say to people who literally feel like they're surviving? Because there's probably a lot of people who physically feel like they're surviving. Like, I physically don't feel like I'm able to meet ends meet, or I physically feel like I'm literally just surviving in this life. Like, I'm not thriving. I'm not living up to my highest potential. What do we have to say to them?
So rationally, specifically, I would say that there's not one answer, but there's an individual answer. So for each person, we are made up of different components, right? And this is kind of a little bit of my mental health coming in. But it's like you have your social life, you have your spiritual life, you have, regardless if you're religious. And then you also have like your physical aspect of yourself. And so it's like when you're looking at these different components of yourself, you have to ask yourself, do I feel like I'm surviving because my mental health is bad? Do I feel like I'm surviving because I don't understand what I actually believe in? Do I feel like I'm surviving because physically I feel sick all the time? Do I feel like I'm surviving because I have no social life? I don't have people around me. I don't have a community. So those 4 components is something that you need to ask yourself, because for me, there's a few things. My mental health was jacked. My community was not supportive. They bashed me a lot. Literally my physical health, like I used to have like eating disorders. Like I would starve myself, like I didn't have energy. And I didn't know that I had certain imbalances in my mind and my body that kept me from literally having energy consistently, or certain times of the year I would just shut down. And so for you have to literally ask yourself, even write it out, like get a piece of paper out, write it out, like how do I feel mentally, physically, spiritually, and socially, and then write out like how is that, you know? For me, I had to take, honestly, like I started the journey of doing that maybe 3 years ago, and I'm a completely different person than I was. The person sitting here talking to you is 100 times different than the person I used to be, because I had to figure out what was imbalanced in my life and why I felt like my life was just a survival technique. And now I do feel like I'm thriving because I've started meeting the needs in those areas. And when you start doing that, you know yourself, you're confident in yourself, and you're ready to pursue those dreams. But you can't skip these levels and go from 0 to 100. Like that's not reality. The reality is sometimes you have to get to know yourself, know your reality, accept that reality, and then dream about the one you can have. Does that make sense for you?
No, that's so, yes. I didn't mean no. Yes, it's like so good. And I 100% relate to you, because I've been in that place, whether it was because I was dating someone who was horrible and emotionally abusive, or if I was just kind of letting my environment control me. Like a lot of times when you grow up in like a small town, or you grow up in like a lower income area, you feel like your dreams have a glass ceiling on them. And that's another thing that we really want to encourage you is not true, and that thriving is possible. But I think that something that both of us can like attest to is that if you don't have the representation that you ultimately need, there still is going to be that like disconnect. Like someone, because I know for me growing up, like I didn't have a lot of strong like women like representation in my life. Like I had strong women all around me, but I didn't really have that person who I could look to who was like, I want to be her. You know what I mean? Like I want the things that she has, and not out of envy, but actually out of like admiration, and to give me something to kind of work up to. So I think that's another thing that is also important to seek out, and that we also want to try to be for them. But kind of what you talked about, it's like compartmentalizing, basically, like kind of setting down and taking responsibility.
Because like, think about it. If I say I could be the most, as you would say, maybe a successful, accomplished person, but then there's a stage in my life where I'm away from my entire community of people. And then eventually I'm consumed with that of like, oh my gosh, I have no one around me. Like I'm struggling, but I feel like I'm taking good care of my body. I feel like I'm the healthiest I've been, but I don't have people around me. Now, if I take that vice versa, you have all the people in the world, but you have no energy. You have no concentration. And that stuff happens because it's like, you cannot fill an empty gap and then ignore that gap for a long time. You know what I mean? For me, it was like,
because it just gets worse.
And for me, like I said, mental health things, like I struggled with my energy levels, with like depression or anxiety. And I let that stuff, continue to take over because I didn't realize that there was a gap there, and I was unwilling to accept the reality that I had a gap.
Yeah.
And so for me, I had to take ownership and decide to move forward and to, choose to pursue the reality that I wanted for my life, basically.
Yeah. And I think that everything you just said is what we're trying to encourage our listeners to do. Thank you, Kayla.
Yes,
this was so fun, and I cannot wait for the rest of the episodes of this. So thank you guys so much for listening. This is the Skin is In podcast. And remember, why survive when you can thrive? Hey babes, it's Natalie. Do you want more of the Skin is In podcast? Subscribe to our YouTube channel and you'll get all the fresh videos sent directly to your inbox. Also, follow us on Apple Music at Skin is In Podcast, and you can find me on Instagram at Natalie Michelle Warren. Love yourself and subscribe today.